guys, it's Amelia, but not the pilot. Today, I'm going to talk about my favorite reads of 2021. First off, can we get a little commotion for this shirt? Look at this fun little... Do I look like, am I giving Goody Proctor or no? Okay, favorite books of the year. I gave out a lot of 5 stars this year, not gonna lie. However, I did read an immense amount of books. Probably not a healthy thing. We're not gonna talk about it today. My 2, I think, favorite books of all time came out of this year. I never thought this would happen. Like, Harry Potter to me is like all-time favorite, never gonna top it. But these 2 books I really feel like are my new like go-to recommend like favorite of all time. I don't know if I would say they're above Harry Potter. I feel like Harry Potter's in a different category for me now. These are my favorite books of all time. You ready? Addie, LaRue. I am obsessed with this book. I cannot talk about it enough. I just don't know how to explain to you how much it means to me. It's essentially like everything I ever wanted out of a book. And I just kept being like utterly shocked at how perfectly curated to me it was. I don't even know how to explain it. So I wouldn't say it's the best book ever for all people, but to me, it is the best book ever. Tied with one other book, but I'm going to explain that in a bit. First, let's talk about Addie. So the full title is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and the story is that it's about this girl, and she is betrothed. She's going to get married in like 16th century France or something like that. 18th century? I'm not really sure. And she is supposed to get married, but she doesn't want to because she is a free woman and she doesn't want to be forced into a marriage. And so she goes into the woods and makes a deal with the devil, essentially. And then the devil grants her wish. But the catch, of course, because she worded it poorly, was that she will live forever, but she will not be remembered by anyone ever that she meets. So now she's free to go explore the world like she's always wanted to do. She's free to go to London and Paris and the US, and she gets to experience all these amazing things and like cool artwork and meet famous people. But the problem is that the second she leaves the room, they completely forget that she ever existed. And the book is just filled with so many cool like adventures, scenario things, and interesting consequences of her curse. And I just love it. And then there's also, of course, a little romance with a dark, mysterious man. Sort of, kind of not. And then there's also some other romances. Also, Addie is bi. We love representation. And there's also mental health discussed in this. Like, I just can't talk about how good this book is. I can't. And we got some New York aesthetic. We got some international aesthetic going on. Like, we've got 18th century, but we've got modern day. It jumps between the 2 different timelines. So you're slowly learning what's going on. It's just so good. And I just really love it. And the visuals, like V. Schwab is such an amazing writer. I honestly believe she is my all-time favorite writer. I just love the way she paints pictures and the way she develops her characters. Her characters are so interesting and real, and they have such like, ooh, I love it. Also, one of my favorite things that came out of this book as well is her description of like depression. She describes depression as like a storm and an oncoming storm, and how you could sense that it's coming and there's nothing you could do about it. It just hits you, but the storm will pass eventually. And I really like that. So, Addie LaRue, I cannot recommend it enough. Also, this cover is gorgeous. Ugh. My other favorite book of all time that I just read this year is If We Were Villains. It has really pretty covers like this one, and this one, right? This is also like perfectly up my alley in a sort of different way, but not quite. It's dark academia, and it's like The Secret History by Donna Tartt, if you've read that, but better, in my opinion, because it's like shorter, more condensed, and more intriguing, I guess. And you get to know the characters a little better, I feel like. So, it follows our main character, Oliver, and he is being released from prison. and you're like, what? How'd you get in here? What's going on? And then it jumps back in time, and we get some like back and forth timeline thing going on again, and you slowly find out how he got there and what happened. So he is at a fancy little school where they are studying Shakespearean plays, and they're all actors. And so it's him and his little group of friends, and they live in this cool little castle tower on a lake, and they all just hang out and recite Shakespeare to each other, just like normal kids. And it's just so, like, aesthetically pleasing and interesting how the Shakespeare is woven into it. And I just really liked that, because I was a former theater kid, and I really love Shakespeare, and I just really liked this book. I don't know how else to talk about it, but it really, like, read as a Shakespearean play almost, how it was like funny and the characters were all interesting and the characters were all different like foils to each other, and there's a murder in the story, and it sort of was reflective of the Shakespeare plays that the characters were putting on in school. So I think they did 2 or 3 plays throughout the book, and so those scenes were included as well, which was really interesting, because they would be doing like a Macbeth scene or something like that, and the scene that they were performing was also reflective of what was happening within their relationship and how the art of Shakespeare was like really influencing their lives, and I just loved it. Also, big plot twist at the end. I was really shocked. Like, I don't get shocked very often with books, and this book had me quaking. So good. So good. I'm not going to say anything else because I don't want to spoil anything, and I could talk about this book for days. Those are my top 2 of the full year. Addie and If We Were Billing were like god tier, and these are just like A+, super great. Vanishing Half, so good. It's about twins. It's about these 2 black twins, but they are light-skinned enough to pass as white, and one of the sisters chooses to pretend to be white for the rest of her life, and the other one doesn't, and it shows their family dynamic and their differences of going through life and how they're affected by their race. All the Young Dudes. I will say it now, I will say it again. If you have not read All the Young Dudes and you love Harry Potter, you need to read this book. It is so good. It's actually 3 books if you want to break it down. It is 1,799 pages, and it is perfect. It is what Harry Potter wishes it was. And if you'd like to hear more about it, please check out, I made an entire video dedicated to it. Human Acts is also really good. It is a Korean translated book about the uprising in Korea. I don't remember when. I want to say the 70s, but there was an uprising between like students and the government. And I don't want to spoil it too much because it's very, very interesting. And I'm not well versed on the actual historical event. I have just read this book and discussed it with a few people, but it's very sad, so prepare yourself. But it's so good, and it's really short. Check it out. Next I have Priory, The Orange Tree. This is yet again another massive tome. It is so long. I think it was 700 pages, I think, but it was very good. It's essentially like a modern day epic. Like it's like an Odyssey or Iliad, and it's a high fantasy of all these different characters. The characters were a little confusing at the beginning, trying to keep everybody straight, but there's dragon riders, and then there's these like women warriors, and there's a whole religion that was invented in this book, and the clash between the one religion and the other religion, witches and darkness seeping in. It's very, very interesting. I 10 out of 10 recommend it. It is going to take a while, but it's so worth it. Red, White, and Royal Blue, so good. This is a rom-com book. I don't read a lot of rom-com books, but I really enjoyed this, so I think I'm gonna try some others. I also read X-Hex, that's another rom-com. I'll talk about that in a little second, because I also would rate that pretty highly. Red, White, and Royal Blue is about the son of the female president of the United States and the royal prince of the British monarchy slowly having an enemies to lovers relationship. It's chef's kiss. So good. Also, X-Hex, which I just mentioned, is another rom-com that I really enjoyed. It's essentially like a Hallmark Christmas movie, but about Halloween instead. And it's so good. I wish there was more like Hallmark Halloween movie books, both movies or books. I want them because it was immaculate. It's about a Welsh witch man who needs to come back to this town in America that happens to have his ex in it, and she's also a witch and she doesn't want to see him again, and they had a bad breakup, but things happen and now they have to work together to save the town. Historical book for you. I read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and it was so good. It gave me all the adventure vibes that I wanted. It was so much fun. If you don't know what it's about, it's by Jules Verne and it is a story of people going on an undersea adventure and discovering undersea animals and like stuff is crazy, man. But it's so good. It's so cute. Fun little adventure. Next I have Klara and The Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is a Japanese translated book and it is immaculate. I'm saying that a lot this video, but it's true. I don't know what to say. It's true. Kazuo Ishiguro, such a great writer. This is the first book I've read by him and I love it. It's from the perspective of an artificial intelligent robot person, and which is very interesting because it's like a unreliable narrator, and the artificial intelligence person is being sold at a store as a friend. So in this futuristic world, people can buy these AI friends for their children, so their children have someone to play with and practice social skills. Very strange. It was a very interesting book. The plot was quite slow, but it was just interesting to hear from this like AI's perspective and the like story that happens. Next I have Crying in H Mart. This book made me cry in the train. It made me cry in my house. It made me cry at work. It made me cry everywhere because it is so sad but so good. It is about a Korean American woman's experiences in life and also about her mother dying of cancer. It's depressing, but it was very interesting. Next we have the Fable duology. I loved both of these. I haven't read a young adult book like this in a while and I loved it. It's sort of pirates but not quite. It was like an ocean adventure, and so it starts with our main character Fable, and she has been left on an island that digs up these gem fossil things for money, and so she's all by herself and she sort of has to like rough and tough it against all these men, and she's trying to make enough money so she could leave the island and go find her parents. That's where we start the book, and then she goes on this fun little adventure, and both books were really quite good, so I 10 out of 10 recommend if you like young adult fantasy. Another classic we have The Princess Bride. I love this movie, but I never even thought about the book before. The book is so good. It's pretty much the same as the movie, so if you've seen the movie, you know the plot, but it was well worth the read. Because the narrator has such an interesting interaction with the reader, like the writer is talking to the reader directly, which was very strange but very funny. Before the Coffee Gets Cold, another Japanese translated literature, so good. It's a bunch of short stories about different relationship things, and the concept is that there's this coffee shop where you could go back in time, but you could only go back in time while you're drinking a cup of coffee. You only have until the coffee gets cold to say what you want to say, and then you have to finish your coffee and leave. This summer I read Vicious and Vengeful by V. Schwab. Yet again, I just can't talk about V. Schwab enough. Her books are so good. She also wrote an entire comic series relating to this duology. Very, very good. The concept is that these two guys go to a college and they're like med students, science people, and they decide for their senior thesis, the one guy wants to explore near-death experiences. And they realize that with a near-death experience, if you survive, you can get superpowers. And from there, we have like a superhero type of story, but they're both pretty villainous, I would say, and it's a very interesting dynamic. Half Sick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian was so good. It's a retelling of the Arthurian legends and the Knights of the Round Table. It follows Gwen, King Arthur, Merlin, that type of group of people, and it's interesting because it's told from the perspective of I forgot her name, but she can see the future, and so it jumps back and forth in her between her visions and real life and her visions of the past, and so it tells it in a sort of chopped up way, which slowly reveals to you what's happening. Very good. I hope there's a sequel because I feel like there was more to happen, but I'm not quite sure if there's going to be. Next we have Night Circus. I loved this book. I've been told to read this book for so many years and I finally got around to it. It was so good. I would rank this the highest of the year if Addie, LaRue, and If We Were Villains did not exist, because this one was so good. It is the story of two magicians who have their apprentices battling off in a magic show. And the setting of this magic show is a circus, and so it's a traveling circus, and the magicians have to create new tents of mystical fantasticalness, and it just has such a magical sense to it. There's so many cool visual interesting things that happen in the story that I was just like, wow, like that's so cool. Like I wish I could experience it and be there, because reading it was just so visually and aesthetically pleasing that it was just so cool. Next up we have Mexican Gothic. I was very surprised by this book. It is essentially a modern classic. It's a spooky little horror book about this spooky house, but it is sort of like a Wuthering Heights type of vibe, and it's Latinx. I honestly only picked it up because I saw people were talking about it, and I was like, oh, I need an audiobook to listen to right now. We're in spooky season, I want something a little horror. This came up, and I was like, sure, why not? 5 stars. So good. It was so interesting. I was on the edge of my seat waiting to see what was gonna happen. It was very like Wuthering Heights, Pride and Prejudice type of vibes. Piranesi, my last book for you guys. Piranesi, I'm gonna be quite honest, I also only chose because it looked like it had Greek mythology involved. That's why I got it. It was great. 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed how the narrator was unreliable. It starts with, I don't want to say too much about this book because I don't want to spoil it for you. I'm just gonna say that it starts with a man and he is in this room, or this hall of many, many rooms. And they all have different statues in them, and there's tides of water in some halls but not in others. There's winds, there's weather, but it's all inside this like giant marble halls of rooms, and there's only one other person in the entire building per se, and he has never found an edge or end to this building, and he doesn't know why he's there. He doesn't know why there's only one other man there, and that's how it starts, and that's all I'm going to tell you because it is a wild ride. It is so good. Those are my recommendations from the books that I read this year. I think that's a good solid amount. I read like 120 something. That was 25-star books. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below what your favorite 2021 books were, because I am always looking for more books to read. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!